I think the Baltimore Ravens are in for a tougher year than people anticipate. And I'm using a couple of different metrics in suggesting that. Number one, they lost more than any other team did this offseason in terms of quality players. They also lost a lot on their defensive coaching staff, which is a big deal. And lastly, they play a very arduous quarterback schedule. One of the ways I make my futures bets or any kind of just predictions for an NFL season is what quarterback schedule are you playing and how daunting is it? And so I look at Baltimore right now, Danny,
Mhm.
only Kansas City is favored at a higher rate to succeed in the AFC in futures markets than the Ravens. In fact, depending on where you're looking, the Chiefs are 5.5 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. The Ravens are 9 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. And then you got the Bills, Texans, and Cowboys after that in all of the NFL. So the expectation is they might be the second best team in football. And with Lamar Jackson at quarterback coming off of a second straight MVP, I understand that the thought is this is a really, really good program. I just think they're going to underachieve from national expectations. And I want to know who your team is in that category. 800-636-1067.
Houston Texans. They played two good teams last year. They had the easiest schedule in human history, and they lost by 30 points when you look at those two games, Cleveland and Baltimore. Everyone is overrating their unbelievable performance in the wild card round, where they were awesome. That was an incredible performance. This was a group that had to win their final couple of games just to make it to the postseason, and they did it against two terrible teams that were pretty much at the end, didn't have very much going for them in Tennessee. And I guess the Colts were technically fighting for something, but unimpressive. Their schedule will not line up that easy anymore. This is a group with a track record that was terrible. I love CJ Stroud like everyone else does. The story is great, but the idea that they're now, because they had one good season, they're now ready to make this huge ascension. It's far more rare that a team does what Detroit just finished doing, and it's far more common for the upstart to kind of revert back to form and miss the postseason. Every year, half the teams that make it don't, and then a bunch of new teams kind of come in, and we act surprised that it happens to us. This team, to me, in a terrible division last year, is absolutely ripe for a little bit of a regression. Doesn't mean I'm out on CJ Stroud or the regime or they won't ever be good again. Just means that we're maybe putting the cart a little bit before the horse here when we talk about this group that's now up with Kansas City, Buffalo, maybe Miami or maybe Baltimore, some of the elite championship contenders. I don't think they're there yet.
To your point, it is pretty astounding how much confidence there is in the Texans right now. They are seventh in terms of odds to win the Super Bowl this year. Seventh. Houston over Philadelphia, Green Bay, Dallas, the Jets with Rodgers coming back, Miami. Some of the real achievers of the last few seasons. The Texans have leapfrogged. So the household teams, Kansas City, San Francisco, Baltimore, Detroit are ahead of them. And then narrowly the Bills and the Bengals, and that's it. Then Houston. I do think that they're going to be really, really good. And my argument for that is the division that they're in is not much better this year than it was last year.
Mhm.
So when you talk about the week schedule, I haven't seen their out of division schedule. I'm sure it levels up some, but they still get to play 6 games in that crap division. And on top of that, you've got now CJ Stroud, who looks like he could be special in his second season with all that he learned last year. And I think you'd agree with me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'll just speak for myself. They might have had the best offseason of any team in the league. They went out and got Daniil Hunter, Stephon Diggs, offensive tackle Blake Fisher, upgraded at running back with Joe Mixon, added to the linebacking core and Azeez El-Shaair, and then they brought in Danico Autry at defensive tackle, who I think's been massively underrated in Indianapolis for a long time and throughout his stops in the league. I loved their offseason.
I
They
did
were
too.
they were aggressive and they kind of went for it. And I think that's part of where that momentum's coming from. But I don't have to tell a whole lot of people sitting in DC that putting a belt on in the offseason as champions of the spring doesn't necessarily net you a whole lot come the fall.
Indeed, and I love their approach. By the way, it sounds like I'm down on them. Long term, I'm not. We've seen this too many times, right? Where a group, I mean, they won more game. They won the same number of games last year as they did the three previous seasons combined, right? It just tells you that this isn't a program with a track record just yet, and everyone's crowning them at this point, and they may very well be very good, but they had an aggressive offseason, which I loved for them. By the way, they're going, hey, now we maybe were ahead of schedule. Let's not apologize for it. Let's strike while the iron's hot. We got a kid that's wise beyond his years at quarterback. The window is now. Let's maximize for CJ Stroud. I love that in terms of an approach. But again, I just kind of go back to it. They're out of conference rather, out of division schedule. As teams like the Bills, has teams like Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, Miami, Kansas City, Baltimore. Like it's a much tougher road to hoe than last year.
Yeah, that is completely different than what they were dealing with. So maybe the record ends up being comparable. My guess is they're better playoff built this time
Yeah, that
around
may be the way to think about it, right?
if they can get there. But I just think your answer is a good one in the sense that people are now saying they're a Super Bowl contender, and
Right.
that feels aggressive.
Yeah, I think they could be even better than they were last year and win 9 games, for example. Again, because of the way the schedule plays out.
So of the top 5 teams in the league, I went Baltimore. I'm curious if any of these teams to you is due for any kind of a step back. Chiefs, San Francisco, Ravens, it sounds like you're not willing to jump in on. Lions, Bills. Of those 5, do you see any of them regressing? The Bills lost a lot this
Yeah, to
offseason.
me, it's the Bills, and it's mostly because of the defense. It's like the part that we don't talk about because they still got Allen, and they went and got the young kid from Florida State in the draft, Coleman, to try to replace Stephon Diggs. It'll be a little bit different. So he's the headliner. He's still there. So how much further are you really going to fall? But they just keep getting older and more beat up, and some attrition on the defensive side. And I think that division is going to be a buzzsaw.
I could see Buffalo taking a small step back. Last year, I was really high on them. Everyone kind of thought that they missed their window, and a lot of times that's when teams push the chips in and go in. See
See
the
the
Caps.
Capitals. Yeah.
But for me, the receiver room, having been completely reworked, gives me some pause. The good thing for the Bills, for the Bengals, I would put the Ravens in this conversation. Funny enough, this is how we started the convo with me being lower on them than a lot of people. When you've got a quarterback like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, they are a lifeguard's buoy that they throw at you. They keep you from going underwater. You're not going to bottom out. You're not going to stink. You're never going to be bad. You're always going to have a shot to make the playoffs. I just don't know. Is Curtis Samuel going to stay healthy there?
Yep.
He could help them a lot. He could be excellent. He could be a tremendous weapon in that offense. It's got to be on the field. He's a little bit redundant, by the way, to Khalil Shakur, the other of the gadget guys that are now making up that top receiver room in Buffalo. Keon Coleman, they drafted in the second round, the transfer to Florida State last year, who's been everybody's kind of favorite guy to say funny things this offseason. I'm really high on him. I think he's a good player. I didn't love him as a fit for kind of what Washington's trying to do, but I think he can help. But he's a wide receiver 1 all of a sudden. Like, I don't love that. Second round rookie. I'm counting on getting 100 some targets and making 70 plus catches. So I could see that if you're telling me the Bills aren't quite on the same level this year. I mean, Allen's going to have to put the cape on. They're going to have to run him more. Generally, that means he gets banged up, takes a lot of shots. And by the end of the year, there's an attrition rate.
Yeah, and that's I think you said it very well. There's too high of a floor when you have one of those guys, right? Like what are they going to win 7 games? No way, right? Like they'll drop back and I think be a little bit worse. Still very dangerous because they got Josh Allen and he could do a superhero thing. Like that's the team that if I don't know, let's say I'm a Baltimore or a Kansas City or somebody maybe up high with a high seed, I would not want to draw Buffalo in the wild card round. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of dangerous team that they could be. Where you may get them in September, you may get them in October, November a couple times, but come okay, all bets are off, all chips are on the line, whatever you want to say. We've got Josh Allen, and that's terrifying.